After reading the book, Pedigree of the Oppressed, I noticed that there were a lot of words in said book that seemed to basically state the same thing over and over again. And also that oppression seems to be a circle, that those who are being oppressed are also oppressing others, and that sometimes while dehumanizing another person, people also dehumanize themselves. Now, in Chapter 1, the first annotation I took was concern for humanization leads to concern for dehumanization. And I feel like that's the two sides of the same coin type of thing. For without people being able to humanize themselves, there would be no dehumanization. But I also feel like dehumanization tends to be a human type of thing. I mean, humans are the only ones who can dehumanize others, so doesn't that mean that dehumanization is a human type thing? And then my second note was, it is rare for former peasants who become overseer over his former comrades to not become a tyrant to them more than the actual boss. That seemed to stand out to me because people who have no power, who all of a sudden gain power over others, tend to seem to abuse it. Number 3 was, the oppressed follow the guidelines of their oppressors. This means that while people are being oppressed, they are tending to take in that oppression and then in turn oppress others in that same manner. Number 4 was, functionally oppression is domesticating. This means by basically humans that oppress others are training others to behave in a certain way and act in a certain way. However, if they are not oppressed, then people tend to have no rules, nothing to follow, no guidelines. Number 5 was, never in history has violence been initiated by the oppressed. How could they be the initiator if they are a product of violence themselves? Now, that seemed to be wrong to me. The idea of an oppressed person not being able to initiate violence seems to counteract the fact that oppression and people who are oppressing others are they themselves oppressed. In that case, then there would be no violence. It would just be people oppressing others and being oppressed themselves. So who was the first one to start the form of oppression? Number 6 was, the oppressed goal is to have more, even if it comes at the price of oppressing others. Basically, people who are oppressing others tend to want more, tend to desire more, and that leads to people going around and oppressing others or becoming their boss and training them how to act, stuff like that. Number 7, if others do not have more, it is because they are lazy. However, there are multiple reasons that someone could not have more. And although this is the idea of the oppressors, they are also, sometimes an oppressor does not have as much as another person, but that doesn't mean they're lazy. It just means that they aren't doing the same thing the others are doing. Number 8 is, the oppressed feel like things owned by the oppressors. The oppressed are dependent on the oppressors, then they go and oppress others. Basically, if you are not being oppressed, then you have no one to rely on. The people who are oppressing others tend to also provide for them, by providing either rules and guidelines or providing money or something else, something that the oppressed need. If the oppressed aren't receiving anything by the oppressors, then they are more likely to not listen to the oppressors. Now, this could also be seen as the oppressed are depending on not being whipped or hit or something else like that, and that is the thing they depend on, not having pain. Now, chapter 2 was talking, basically, chapter 2 talks about how teachers use the banking system on students and how this leads to students not truly understanding the information that they receive, and this leads to reality being distorted and no one being able to understand true reality. And then it was just people tend to view the reality, and if they are viewing their reality as someone else has taught them to view reality, then they are basically being oppressed. Chapter 3, humans' existence cannot be without words or dialogue or communication with other humans. This means that humans rely on communication with others to be truly human and to be unoppressed. If an oppressor wishes to truly oppress his oppressees, then he has to limit the communication that the oppressed have with one another. And that is an important fact that the oppressed need to settle with their oppressors. Another thing that I took from that chapter was that humans can create a false reality using their words, basically by training the oppressed to be adaptable in their oppression by using their words and saying that the oppressed need to be oppressed, and that without their oppression that they would be weak or not doing as well. Chapter 4 was basically just a recap of the previous 3 chapters, and also talked a bit about revolutionaries who believe dialogue between the oppressed is important for them to be able to become more human-like and unimpressed. Sorry I went a bit over.